Thank you very much. I used to work for the government, and if there was one thing I learned, it was that you can't know everything, but what you can do is you can surround yourself with people who do. And I think that's what we've done here today. Alex Pourbaix, as you heard, is the executive chair of Cenovus. He's spent 30 years in the energy industry in Canada. In a prior life for both of us, we were both involved with the Keystone Pipeline. I still wake up in the middle of the night screaming when I think about it. But he has provided Cenovus with leadership in a variety of capacities over the years. And maybe we should just get right to it, Alex. The topic for today is the topic of this forum is fostering economic resilience. And it is hard to think of something that is more important to economic resilience over the long haul than the energy transition. And maybe we can start out across North America. There has been effort at the federal, the state, the provincial levels of government to regulate that energy transition. And I've got two questions for you that come out of that. One is, how well have they done? How effective has it been? And is there a way that those various governmental entities, both within Canada, within the United States, and across the border, might be able to work together?
David, that's a great question. And, I kind of feel right now we're living in this laboratory where we can see the two federal governments are going at it in significantly different ways. In the U.S., you have the Inflation Reduction Act which has really been a part of that Inflation Reduction Act includes the U.S. government's ambition to reduce emissions. And they've put in place really just an expansion of a production tax credit. It is a 100% carrot, almost no stick. If you put a ton of CO2 in the ground, you get $90 from the government. And I think what they've done there that is very impressive is they're going to harness the power of the market. And I believe people are really going to find ways to reduce carbon with that competitive tension. Canada, we're going about it a little differently. I would candidly say we're looking at more sticks than carrots. Our government, I think people would have seen, as recently came out with an ambition to reduce emissions from my sector, the oil and gas sector, by 42% by 2030. That is patently impossible. I try to tell people, every ton of CO2 that we sequester in our sector is coming at the end of a multi-billion-dollar investment. That takes time for permits, time for construction, getting those projects in place. So it is a bit of a different way of going about it. I would say in Canada, we have a little more challenge in that the provinces own the resources. So you have a federal government with emission reduction ambitions running into a provincial government that has ambitions about its economy, its tax base, its royalty base. So far, I would say, we're well down the path. The Alberta government, the federal government, and our industry, the oil sands industry, through this Pathways initiative, where we're working to try to find a common ground that's acceptable for everyone.
Alex, you talk about the fact that in Canada, the resources are owned by the provinces. Different situation in the United States. But the one thing that's true in both countries is that they're both big places that are very diverse, both in terms of their energy production and their energy consumption. Yeah. And you do business across the border. How effective, how appropriate have both governments been in trying to bridge those gaps between the producing provinces, the consuming provinces, and different politics in different parts of the country?
Yeah, no, David, once again, it's a really good question. We had the minister here over lunch, and she talked about, what different industries are bringing to the country. But my industry, I think in 2022, we paid the industry in total to all levels of government paid about $50 billion in taxes, and we represent about a third of the trade of the country of Canada. So I would argue that this industry is incredibly important for all Canadians. But we also we have to have, as I said, a resolution that works to kind of bridge that incredibly economic importance of our industry with Canada's desire to decarbonize. And I say this all the time. I think the province of Alberta, our industry, we all want the same thing that the federal government does, a much cleaner industry. What's important is, and the argument is really over the time that it's going to take to decarbonize. Our government in Ottawa is very ambitious, and they would like all industry to decarbonize at a much faster pace than I think we naturally would be able to do. So that we need policies that are resilient and will allow us to decarbonize, will help with the very significant cost of decarbonizing, and can do it at pace as technology develops to allow us to do it.
Alex, I am reminded with your comment about the scale of the energy industry in Canada. I'm from Chicago, and Illinois has more, at least it used to, I think it's still true, has more trade with Alberta than it does with any state in the United States. Yeah. And it's because of the energy industry. So it has a huge impact in both of our places. All right. Just to change directions a little bit here, do we have to rely on the government for the energy transition? Can any of this be completed without either government sticks or government carrots? I think
I thought something was falling apart there.
You look great.
I'm no Tony Robbins, apparently.
No, you're not. But I love them.
Sorry, I got distracted there for a minute.
Do we have to?
No. The question was,
we have to rely on the government.
The question was, do we rely on the government? One of the things that I think a lot of people don't think about, and this is not just true for the energy sector, it's really true for just about every sector. These investments to decarbonize, they have no revenue associated with them. They bring a societal good, which is reducing CO2, but they typically do nothing in terms of, they do not add revenue, and they will cost billions or tens of billions of dollars. So I think, there is a role for government. As I said, like, our industry was on the path to decarbonizing anyway. My company, had reduced emissions intensity by about 30% over the last 15 years. But to do it on that scale that our federal government wants to do it, someone is going to have to step up and help us cover that cost. And I make the example of the energy sector. Canada, we represent, I think, around 5.5 million barrels of a day of oil equivalent production. Canada could go to zero tomorrow in terms of production. And all of that market share would be gladly taken up by Russia, gladly taken up by Saudi Arabia, and we would lose all of that economic benefit with zero environmental benefit for the world. So I think it's important we do it with government, that we share the burden of this, and we're going to pay a massive amount of this cost ourselves. But to do it at the pace that the government ambitions would require, I think really does require the combination of industry working very closely with government.
I kind of have in mind particularly wind, but to a lesser extent solar. But are there energy transition projects that stand on their own economic terms, that maybe at one time needed government support, but may not need it anymore?
Well, it's interesting. In a prior life, I ran Canada's largest private sector power company, and we did a lot of investment in renewables. And I would tell you, I always hear people say that, on a LCOE basis, renewables are cheaper than gas-fired generation. And my response to that is only if you don't mind when you get electricity. And, the challenge with renewables on their own is that they're unreliable, but I think even more challenging is they're unreliably unreliable, and that you don't know when they're going to run and when they're not going to run. So if you value reliability, and let me tell you, everybody in this room values reliability. For 150 years, we've expected that light to go on, that furnace to go on when that switch is hit. That then it is a much more expensive technology. I tend to see that I don't like the word transition, because I think we're going to be using oil and gas for many, many years. I think we're going to see a lot more renewables. I'm supportive of that. I hope and pray we're going to see more nuclear, and an old colleague of mine from Bruce Nuclear, James Sconiac, is here, and he's been a great apostle to push nuclear. But I tell you, if we want to have an electricity grid that delivers safe, reliable power, we're going to need more than renewables. So I think we're going to see all of the above.
You talked about nuclear. There's a tremendous amount of discussion these days about, and Bruce being one, small modular reactors. And the other thing that seems to be the topic du jour is nuclear fusion, which has been 10 years in the offing for the last 50 years. But it does seem like maybe it's a little bit closer today than it was. Which just kind of raises the broader question of the role of innovation and of technology in this energy transition. And what's been your experience at Cenovus or before that?
I think it's incredibly important. Technological evolution is how we're going to achieve our aspirations. And I think you made a great comment about small modular reactors. If you think about in the oil sands, the Achilles heel, if you will, of the oil sands business, at least the steam-assisted gravity drainage SAGD, is that we burn natural gas to produce steam, which we inject down the wellbore in order to mobilize the oil. Small modular reactors have this incredible ability to produce that high-quality steam that the industry needs, while also being able to operate in a cogen mode where they're producing power, which we're going to need if we have aspirations to decarbonize the production of power. So I've been on record as being a huge fan of small modular reactors. I think as you're going to see in our industry, we're going to start out with relatively proven technology. CCUS, you're going to see more use of solvents replacing steam in the oil sands. Huge strides are being made on methane reduction, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas, as I think most people know. But then as we move kind of 2 decades out and 3 decades out, I think that's when you're really going to see these technologies like small modular reactors, direct air capture, I think is a technology that has a great opportunity. But once again, a lot of work to be done. And I would put fusion is going to be, I think our grandchildren might be talking about it 10 years out.
Oh, that I had grandchildren. For those folks in the audience who are not nuclear engineers, there's the term small modular reactors. Will it fit on this table? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Well, if anyone's been out to Bruce Power, which is the largest nuclear site in the world, I believe it has 8 CANDU reactors. I think it is just massive. But these small modular reactors, it's funny. I mean, there's actually a huge range of them, and people think of them as these little toaster oven sized things. And I mean, I've read about some that are as small as several megawatts, up to and including projects that are kind of in the 400, 500 megawatt range. And I think the problem with the real big ones is it's tough to find an industrial process that can require that scale of heat and power. So I think you're going to see a range of them. The last time I checked, I think there's something like 22 or 23 that are going through various stages of regulatory approval. So definitely on the come.
We were having a conversation at my table before we came up here about the role of increased productivity and the government's responsibility to help to increase productivity. And in whether it's fusion or small modular or any of the other things that you listed, how effective has the government been in encouraging, developing, financing some of those technologies across North America?
I would say all levels of government historically, we've made incredible strides in whether it's the production of conventional energy, whether it's improving the technology behind renewable technology. But governments have a huge role to play. I think the U.S. has been brilliant in this, and when the U.S. government decides,
happy to hear that.
not sure they're brilliant on everything. We might disagree on one or two, but
we'll take what we get.
No, but honestly, I give the U.S. a huge amount of credit. I think the Inflation Reduction Act. I think that the government decided that they wanted to be a global leader in clean tech, and they wanted all of that, the patents, the IP, everything. They wanted it to be the U.S. that was driving that, because that is what was going to ultimately bring the benefits to the U.S. economy. And one of the great things about the U.S. is you guys can do it at scale. It's a big enough economy. It's tougher for Canada. It's tougher for our governments. But I do think this is an example. I have said when it comes to emission reduction, we have the fourth largest reserves of oil on the planet. We need to make use of that. And what a great opportunity if Canada can help take a lead in that. The technology, like the advances we're going to make in CCUS, those are things that we will be able to market all over the world as Canadians. And so I think we can do this in a slightly smaller scale, but government role is super important.
Alex, as I've been at this conference over the last 2 days and really in pretty much every meeting that I've had over the last several months, it's hard to escape a discussion of artificial intelligence. And it's either going to solve every problem we have, or it's going to create every problem that we don't want. But what role, if any, have you seen, whether at Cenovus or elsewhere, both on the production side, but on the consumption side as well?
Yeah, I think, AI is just having a massive impact, I think, on all industries. And one thing, and I think a lot of people in this room know this, might be new to others, but I'm not sure there's an industry in the world that is as technologically complex as producing oil and gas. The work that goes into it, the subsurface work, the geophysics, you name it. And AI is already starting to have a huge impact on improving how we're able to get oil out of that, to do it, get more oil out for less money, to get better environmental impacts, use less steam, use less energy. So it's having a huge impact. I also think I sit on a board of an electrical utility. And I just watch the things that AI is doing there, where, for example, every household having the ability, you can turn down the AC for 20 minutes, no one notices, but it allows you to peak shave and massively reduce, the cost of what would otherwise be the cost of electricity, or even the availability. So I think we're going to see it. I think it's a game changer. We're going to continue to see it both on the production side and on the consumption side.
And it'll help my kids write reports for school. All right, to change gears a little bit here, one of the issues that has confronted us across North America is reconciliation with our indigenous populations. And what are the solutions, what are the policies that you see as being critical to ensuring that those indigenous groups participate in the energy transition?
Well, look, a lot of people don't understand this as much as they should, but on the upstream energy side, certainly in Canada, I believe we're the largest employer of Indigenous people in the country. These are some of the highest paying jobs in the country. And industry has been working at this for 30 years. To give you an idea, my company, Cenovus, a huge amount of the services we bring in, whether it's drilling, safety, camp work, those are provided by Indigenous owned and run companies in our area. So I think we really have a good template for that. But I will tell you, this decarbonization is going to require, in many ways, decarbonization is really electrification. We're going to require a massive build out of new generating facilities, massive build out of transmission, distribution systems. All of those are going to run directly into traditional Indigenous lands in our country, in the U.S., and I, for one, think it's really important that we do that. We have a plan to bring those communities in early. What they need is access to capital, and they, frankly, industries need a push that it's a good thing to do business with Indigenous-run companies and to deal with Indigenous communities up front. So incentives to ensure that occurs. I think that's what's really important.
All right, last question before they serve dessert, if they haven't already. What is the next big thing in energy transition that, in your view, just isn't getting enough attention?
I might disappoint some people, but if you've heard me, I'm on this a bit. I think the next big thing, and it can be perceived as maybe a bit of a negative, is that I think worldwide, I think very few people understand at all the challenges of attempting to take our present energy, how we produce energy, how we consume energy, and which is largely done right now with fossil fuels, and to turn that into a non-emitting, into using non-emitting sources. And I have been very, very vocal. I say this to the media. I say it to politicians. Everybody needs to be incredibly inquisitive about how hard this is going to be, how long it's going to take realistically, and what is the cost going to be to society. Because if this turns around and quadruples or quintuples people's hydro bills, this is going to fall on its face. And we actually need to be, I think we need to be very open with people. We need to do a lot of work. As I said, I think we're going in the right direction. We have to do it at a pace that doesn't destroy the economy and doesn't destroy affordability for people.
Alex, thank you very much. Tony Robbins couldn't have done it better.
Thanks so much, everyone.